We live in a world that glorifies hustle but whispers about burnout. The office becomes a battlefield, the inbox a source of dread, and the work week feels more like survival than progress. We're told to manage stress as if it's a task we can check off by lunchtime, but job stress isn't just about tight deadlines or heavy workloads. It's about meaninglessness. It's about feeling invisible. It's about waking up each morning and asking, is this really all there is? The truth is, stress doesn't start at your desk. It starts when you forget why you're there. It grows in the silence between who you are and what you do. But here's the good news, you're not powerless. You're not stuck, and you are not alone. The way out isn't more productivity, it's more clarity, more purpose, more connection. Let's talk about what it really takes to overcome job stress, not with empty motivation, but with perspective that lasts. When we talk about stress at work, the first thing we tend to blame is the workload. The meetings, the micromanagement, the impossible deadlines. And while all of that contributes, they're not the root. The real root of stress often starts with losing sight of why we even started in the first place. Because when you know your why, everything else becomes easy to carry, even the hard days. Think about the very first day you stepped into your job. Whether it was a role you dreamed about or simply the next step in your path, there was a reason you accepted it. Maybe it was financial stability. Maybe it was a stepping stone. Maybe it was because you believed you could make a difference. But there was something inside you that said yes. Over time, as routines harden and expectations stack up, that yes becomes buried. You forget the intention that drove you. You lose the spark. And without a reason, work becomes mechanical, repetitive, draining. Stress feels heavier when meaning feels absent. So how do we reconnect with it? We begin by asking ourselves a question we don't ask nearly enough. Why am I doing this? Not just, why do I need this job? But why does this matter to me? When people don't see meaning in their work, their stress multiplies. But when they connect their work to something greater, whether it's providing for a family, solving problems that matter, or even building toward a future dream, their stress becomes fuel, not friction. This is not about romanticizing your job. It's not about pretending every task is a life-changing mission. It's about anchoring your efforts to something personal, something honest. Maybe you're a teacher overwhelmed with paperwork and deadlines. Go back to the first time you helped a student understand something for the first time. That moment mattered. That connection was real. That was your why. Maybe you're in customer service dealing with complaints all day long. It's easy to lose patience until you remember that each call is a chance to de-escalate a storm, to bring calm into someone's day, and to be the voice of dignity in a system that often lacks it. That's your why. If you're in sales or finance or logistics, any field that often feels removed from impact, it's easy to feel like a cog in the machine. But look deeper. What system are you helping run smoother? What pain point are you removing for someone downstream who benefits from your work? The moment you start asking these questions, your role changes. You're no longer just clocking in and out. You're showing up for something. That something might be big. It might be small, but it's yours. There's another reason this matters. Clarity creates resilience. When we lose clarity about our purpose, we become emotionally fragile. Everything feels like a threat. Every request feels personal. Every piece of feedback feels like an attack. But when we know why we're doing something, we can step back, we can breathe, we can see criticism as information, not condemnation. Leaders do this exceptionally well. Great leaders remind their teams of the mission before they talk about the metrics. They know that numbers don't inspire people, meaning does. And that same principle applies to you. Be the leader of your own work life. Remind yourself of the mission before the task. Reconnecting with your why doesn't mean your stress vanishes, but it shifts the way you carry it. You no longer see pressure as punishment. You see it as part of the process. And that mindset makes all the difference. If you're waking up dreading each morning, don't just reach for a vacation or a motivational quote. Reach inward. Ask yourself, why did I start? And if you can't remember, dig deeper. Ask yourself, what am I working toward now? Even if it's changed, even if it's evolved, find something that resonates today. And if you come up empty, if you're no longer aligns with where you are, then maybe that stress isn't something to fix, but something to listen to. Maybe it's calling you toward a change, toward a reset, toward something that does connect with who you are now. But the journey to overcome stress doesn't start with escaping it. It starts with understanding it. It starts with remembering that meaning is not found. It's chosen. It's created. It's something you bring to the table each day, not something you wait to receive. When you start with why, you remember that you're not just working, you're building something, living something, moving towards something that matters. We've been conditioned to see stress as the villain, the thing we need to escape, minimize, or medicate. But stress, at its core, is not the enemy. Stress is information. It's a signal. It's the mind and body telling us something is off. But too often we attack the symptom and ignore the cause. We try to relax, unplug, or push through, but we never really ask what our stress is trying to say. And more often than not, what it's telling us is this: you're disconnected. Disconnection is a silent killer in the workplace. It happens when we no longer feel aligned with our work, our team, or even ourselves. It creeps in when we feel unseen, unheard, or unimportant. You could be sitting at a desk with 10 people around you and still feel completely alone. That's not because of the work, it's because of the missing connection within it. Let's take a deeper look. There are 3 major areas where disconnection leads to burnout and sustained job stress: disconnection from purpose, disconnection from people, disconnection from self. When we lose sight of purpose, even simple tasks feel heavy. You could be doing the exact same job you once loved, but without a clear reason or emotional investment behind it, everything starts to feel like a burden. The problem isn't the task, it's the loss of meaning behind it. Then there's disconnection from people. No matter how independent we are not built to operate in isolation. We need feedback, we need community, we need to feel like what we're doing matters to someone else. When your contributions go unacknowledged or your concerns are dismissed, it chips away at your sense of worth. And that erosion leads to stress, not because the work got harder, but because the environment became colder. And finally, the most subtle but dangerous disconnection from self. This happens when your job demands a version of you that's not authentic. Maybe you're constantly performing, pretending, or pushing down your true opinions. Maybe you've convinced yourself that your needs are less important than results. Or maybe you've been running on autopilot for so long, you don't even know what you feel anymore. This self-betrayal is one of the deepest sources of stress, because pretending is exhausting, suppressing is exhausting, and when your job becomes a stage instead of a space, it's only a matter of time before you burn out. So how do we rebuild that connection? It starts with honesty. You have to stop and ask yourself some difficult questions. Do I feel seen here? Do I feel safe to express myself? Do I feel like I belong? Do I still care about what I'm doing, or am I just surviving it? These aren't complaints, they're insights. They're the doorway back to alignment. Connection doesn't require a massive overhaul. Sometimes it starts with one real conversation, one meaningful relationship, one courageous decision to show up as you are rather than who you think you're supposed to be. When we feel connected to a purpose, a person, or our own identity, we develop resilience. We become more capable of handling pressure because we're not carrying it alone. There's a bigger reason behind it. That's why some people in high-pressure jobs still find joy while others crumble under far less. It's not about how much stress they carry. It's about how connected they are while carrying it. When companies prioritize connection over control, something powerful happens. Employees engage more. Communication opens up. Trust builds. And stress doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It becomes manageable, even motivating. But if you're in an environment where connection feels impossible, where empathy is absent and authenticity is punished, then it's worth asking, is this environment helping me become who I want to be? If not, the stress you're feeling may not be a signal to cope better. It might be a signal to leave. Reconnection also means being present with yourself. Not just physically showing up, but emotionally checking in. How's your energy? What's your body telling you? What are your emotions pointing toward? Most people spend more time checking their emails than checking their own mindset. And that disconnection makes them vulnerable to stress in ways they don't even recognize. The path to overcoming job stress isn't paved with hacks and habits. It's paved with connection. Because when you are connected to what you do, who you do it with, and why it matters, stress doesn't feel like a wall. It feels like a challenge you're equipped to face. So before you search for the next productivity tool or time management trick, take a moment to ask yourself a deeper question: where have I disconnected? Because the answer to that question just might lead you back to the clarity, energy, and resilience you've been missing. One of the most paralyzing aspects of job stress is the feeling of helplessness. That sense that no matter how hard you work, the pressure just keeps building. The deadlines don't shift, the expectations don't ease, the meetings don't end, and slowly you begin to believe that you have no say. That stress is something being done to you. But here's the true thing: the most dangerous part of job stress isn't the stress itself. It's the belief that I have no control. The key to shifting that belief is to stop focusing on what you can't change and start doubling down on what you can. Because when you feel even a small sense of influence over your environment, your mindset changes. You stop reacting and you start responding. You stop drowning in overwhelm and you start choosing how to swim. Let's get real. There will always be factors outside your control. Bosses with impossible demands, teammates who don't communicate, systems that are broken. But stress becomes toxic when we spend all our energy resisting what's unchangeable instead of focusing on what's within reach. So what exactly can you influence? You can influence your mindset. You may not be able to control the workload, but you can control how you interpret it. Is it a threat? Or is it a challenge? That simple reframing can shift your experience of stress. When you view a task as a challenge, your brain responds differently. You feel more alert, more focused, more capable. But when you see it as a threat, your brain defaults to survival mode, shutting down creativity and increasing tension. The work hasn't changed, but your relationship, if it has, that's influenced your boundaries. Too many people say yes out of fear of looking lazy, of disappointing someone, of being judged. And yet, every unnecessary yes is a quiet betrayal of your priorities. Reclaiming control means learning to say no without guilt. It means defining what you are willing to tolerate and what you are not. You don't need to be aggressive. You need to be clear, because no one respects a boundary you don't enforce. You can influence your energy. You might not be able to remove the 9 a.m. meeting, but you can choose how you prepare for it. How you fuel your body, how you recover. I've ritualed small rituals into your day that refill your day. Take a 5-minute walk, a breathing practice, a moment of silence between calls. These things sound small, but when you commit to them consistently, they create the mental space you need to stay steady under pressure. You don't wait for time. You make time. That's control. You can influence your environment. Even the most good workplaces, there are ways to create micro-environments that support your focus and calm. The way you organize your desk, the way you communicate with your closest colleagues, the energy you bring into a room. If your team is chaotic, you can be the one who brings clarity. If your culture is cold, you can be the one who brings warmth. You can't change everyone, and that tone ripples outward, but you can influence your voice. Far too often, people bottle their frustration until it turns into resentment. But reclaiming control means speaking up. With honesty, with courage, and with clarity. If something isn't working, say so, not with blame, but with ownership. Here's what I'm experiencing. Here's what I need. Here's what I propose. That kind of communication doesn't just reduce your stress, it elevates your value. People notice those who advocate for solutions rather than silently endure problems. This doesn't mean you're responsible for fixing everything. It means you are responsible for identifying where power begins and using it. Even if it's just 10% of the situation, that 10% matters. Because when you act from that place, you reclaim something vital in your sense of agency. Agency is the antidote to job stress. It's what turns pressure into progress. It's what turns helplessness into strength. When you choose your response, even in a system that feels rigid, you reawaken a deep truth: you are not powerless. Here's the secret that most people miss. Small actions compound. One new habit, one honest conversation, one strategic boundary. These are not massive changes, but over time they create massive shifts. And every time you exercise influence, a deeper belief: I can handle this. You may not be able to change your boss or the market or the budget, but you can change the way you show up. You can lead yourself even if no one else is leading you. And in doing that, you begin to rise, not by escaping stress, but by learning how to navigate it with purpose, clarity, and control. One of the greatest misconceptions in the modern workplace is that saying, ICE makes you valuable. That being constantly available, constantly responsive, constantly agreeable somehow proves your worth. But in truth, the inability to say no is not a sign of dedication, it's a recipe for burnout. If you want to overcome job stress, you must learn to set boundaries. And more importantly, you must learn to do it without apology. Boundaries are not about rejection, they're about protection of your energy, your focus, your well-being. They are the invisible lines that say, I respect myself enough to protect what I need in order to show up fully. Without boundaries, even the most talented people eventually collapse under the weight of everyone else's expectations. The problem is, boundaries often feel like confrontation, like we're letting someone down or breaking a silent contract of compliance. So instead of speaking up, we stretch ourselves thin. We take on the extra project. We answer emails at midnight. We say yes when every part of us is screaming no. And over time, the stress builds, not just from the workload, but from the quiet resentment that follows every forced smile and every reluctant agreement. But here's the truth: every IS you give without alignment is a no to something that matters, a no to rest, a no to family, a no to your own mental clarity. And when you say yes, too often out of fear, your stress isn't just a result of overwork. It's the result of self-abandonment. Setting boundaries begins with a mindset-shifting understanding that your worth is not measured by your availability. You are not valuable because you sacrifice yourself for others. You are valuable because of the unique contribution only you can make. And you can't make that contribution if you're depleted. Start by identifying your non-negotiables. What time of day do you need to unplug to recharge? What types of tasks consistently drain you beyond what's reasonable? What kinds of conversations cross a line emotionally or psychologically? These aren't preferences or cues. They tell you where your energy is most vulnerable and where it needs protection. Then communicate them clearly. Boundaries don't work if no one knows they exist. And clarity doesn't mean conflict. You can say, I'm unavailable for meetings after 6 p.m. sounding rude. Without say, I need interrupted to focus in the mornings without being difficult. The key is turning firm, respectful, unapologetic. Unapologetic doesn't mean cold. It means confident. It means you no longer shrink to make others comfortable. Because every time you apologize for having a boundary, you reinforce the idea that your needs are an inconvenience. They're not. They're a priority. But don't expect everyone to cheer when you start setting boundaries. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries will likely resist your new clarity. That doesn't mean you're doing it right. It means you're doing it right. Discomfort is part of the adjustment, but in time, people adapt. And if they don't, they reveal something important: their respect was conditional on your compliance. Boundaries also model strength. When you uphold your limits, you teach others how to respect themselves. You create an environment where clarity replaces confusion and honesty replaces resentment. Imagine a team where everyone knows their limits, communicates them with courage, and respects each other's guardrails. The team isn't just less stressed, they're more effective. Also, remember that boundaries are not just external. They need boundaries with your own mind. Are you mentally leaving work at work? Or are you carrying it home every night in your head? Are you checking emails during family dinners, not because anyone asked, but because you've trained yourself to be? On 247. Internal boundaries are just as crucial. Choose when your day starts and when it ends. Choose when to stop chasing perfection and submit the work. Choose when to step away, not because the job is done, but because you need to rest. These are the choices that build long-term resilience. Job stress often feels like an external force, but the most powerful leverage you have lies within. Every boundary you draw is an act of self-leadership, and self-leadership is the foundation of sustainable performance. So if you're overwhelmed, overworked, or constantly on edge, don't just ask, how do I manage stress? Ask, where have I failed to protect myself? That question won't just change your workload, it will change your life. Because in the end, boundaries are not walls to keep out. They are doors that lead you back to yourself. Your energy, your clarity, your calm. And once you step through that door, stress no longer owns you. You own your space. Stress thrives in silence, not just the silence of a quiet office or a long day at the desk, but the kind of silence where no one knows what you're really carrying. The silence where you smile and say, I'm fine, even when you're breaking on the inside. The silence where you convince yourself that asking for help is weakness and that strong people solve problems alone. But here's what too many professionals forget: you were never meant to do this alone. Work may look like an individual effort on the surface, but nothing sustainable ever happens in isolation. Even the most seemingly independent roles are part of a larger system. Every team, every project, every deadline, it all depends on interaction, collaboration, support. So why do we try to carry the stress on our own? The problem is pride, or fear, or sometimes both. We're afraid that if we speak up, we'll be seen as incapable. Well, that if we lean, be seen as someone who's burdensome. So we isolate and internalize, we overcompensate, and we burn out quietly. All because we bought into the myth that strength means doing everything by ourselves. Real strength is different. Real strength is the courage to say, I need support. It's the humility to admit, and I can't do this alone. And it's the wisdom to recognize that the most successful people are not the ones who suffer in silence. They're the ones who build alliances, who create a support system around themselves that allows them to perform, recover, and rise again. So how do you find your allies? You start by being one. Too many people wait for support instead of offering it. But trust is not demanded, it's earned. When you step into someone else's stress and say, you don't have to carry that alone, you create a bond that goes beyond a job description. And often, it's in those small moments of shared humanity that the foundation of real connection is built. Look around your environment. Who do you trust? Who shows up when things get hard? Who listens not to respond, but to understand? Those are your people. Cultivate those relationships. Not just with casual small talk, but with real, meaningful conversation. Ask how they're really doing. Share how you're doing. Not the polished version, but the honest one. And slowly, something powerful happens. The walls start to come down. The pressure starts to lift, and you realize you're not alone anymore. Sometimes your allies won't be your teammates. They might be mentors, family, a therapist, a community outside of work. The key is not who they are, it's that they exist, that you have people in your life who can remind you of your value when you forget it, people who can speak clarity into your confusion, people who can give you perspective when your vision is clouded by stress. This doesn't make you dependent. It makes you human. We're not designed to run at full speed without recovery. We're not built to absorb tension without release. Just like athletes have coaches, trainers, and teammates, professionals need emotional and strategic allies to thrive. Burnout doesn't happen just because of the load. It happens because of the absence of support. And sometimes being an ally means advocating for the culture you want to see. If your team doesn't prioritize mental well, being the voice that brings it up. If your workplace lacks emotional safety, create it one conversation at a time. When people see that vulnerability is allowed, they follow. When they see that openness is respected, they engage. Culture is not built by policies, it's built by people. Let's also be honest, sometimes the workplace is the last place where you feel supported. In toxic cultures, asking for help feels dangerous. In rigid systems, being honest about stress is seen as weakness. But even in those environments, you still have a choice. You can find support elsewhere, you can build your circle outside of the walls, and if nothing else, you can choose not to believe the lie that you're supposed to suffer in silence. Job stress will always exist. The stakes, the pace, the pressure, they don't disappear. But when you face them with people who get you, who support you, who walk with you, the weight becomes manageable. The storm doesn't change, but your shelter gets stronger. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, stop asking how much more you can carry. Start asking who's walking beside you, because the question isn't whether you're strong enough to survive. The question is whether you're connected enough to thrive. We live in a culture where rest is treated like a prize, something you earn only after you've pushed yourself to the edge, something reserved for weekends, vacations, or the rare moment when everything on your list is finally checked off. But the problem is that moment rarely comes. The to-do list never ends. The demands never stop. And so we keep running, promising ourselves we'll rest later, not realizing that later is already costing us everything. Here's the uncomfortable truth: stress is not always caused by the work itself. It's caused by the absence of recovery between the work. And unless you redefine what rest means and how you integrate it into your routine, job stress will always have the upper hand. We tend to think of rest as laziness, as weakness, as a break from productivity. But that mindset is broken. Rest is not the opposite of work. It's what makes work sustainable. It's not a delay in progress. It's a requirement for it. Think about high-performance athletes. They don't train nonstop. They don't lift weights every hour of every day. In fact, the most elite athletes protect their recovery time as fiercely as they do their training sessions. Why? Because they understand that growth doesn't happen in the exertion. It happens in the recovery. Muscles are built in rest. So is resilience. So is mental clarity. And yet in the workplace, we've convinced ourselves that the only way to succeed is to grind ourselves into the ground. That belief is not noble. It's self-destructive. So what does it mean to redefine rest? It means making recovery a discipline, not an afterthought. It means weaving it into your daily rhythm, not just your weekends or your PTO requests. It means understanding that mental fatigue is just as real as physical fatigue, and that ignoring it doesn't make you tough. It makes you less effective. Start by changing your relationship with time. Most people treat time as an enemy, something they're constantly racing against. But what if time was an ally? What if instead of trying to squeeze more out of every minute, you focused on protecting a few minutes that actually matter? 10 minutes of breathing before a meeting, 5 minutes to eat lunch without a screen, a few moments between calls to recalibrate your mind instead of jumping from stress to stress without pause. These are not luxuries. These are lifelines. Next, understand the difference between escape and recovery. Scrolling through your phone for hours isn't rest, it's numbing. Binge. Watching a show until 2 a.m. isn't rest. It's avoidance. True recovery refuels you. It recenters you. It restores your sense of self. That might look like movement, meditation, journaling, reading, walking, or simply sitting in silence. Whatever it is, it should leave you feeling more grounded, not more distracted. One of the most powerful forms of rest is presence. We're constantly caught between reliving yesterday and anticipating tomorrow, and that mental time travel exhausts us. But when you're fully present, when you allow yourself to exist in the moment without judgment, you create space for your nervous system to settle. And in that space, stress begins to lose its grip. Leaders who understand this don't just protect their own rest, they encourage it in others. They nautialize boundaries. They build cultures that value mental clarity over constant busyness. Because they know that burned out teams don't innovate, they don't collaborate, they don't last. But even if your environment doesn't encourage rest, you can choose it for yourself. You don't need permission to care for your mental state. You don't need validation to slow down. You just need the courage to believe that you're not a machine and you were never supposed to be one. There will always be more to do, more expectations, more pressure. But if you wait until everything is done to rest, you'll never get there. And the price you'll pay for waiting will be your health, your relationships, your joy. So what if you stopped viewing rest as something you get after the job is done and started viewing it as something you need in order to do the job well? What if you stopped proving your value by how exhausted you are and started protecting your energy like it matters? Because it does. Stress is not always a matter of too much work. Sometimes it's a matter of too little restoration, too little space, too little silence. And when you learn to prioritize recovery, not as an escape, but as a strategy, you don't just reduce stress, you build strength. Rest is not a reward. It's not something you earn by surviving the storm. It's the anchor that keeps you steady through it. It's the ritual that gives you the power to rise again. There's a common misconception that all stress is bad, that any sign of pressure means something's wrong, that if you feel stretch, you're breaking. But that's not the full picture, because while chronic stress can be harmful, not all stress is created equal. Some of it, when understood and managed properly, is the exact environment where growth is born. Growth doesn't happen in comfort. It doesn't happen when everything is easy, predictable, and smooth. It happens in moments of stretch, moments of challenge. Moments when you're pushed slightly beyond your current capacity, not so far that you break, but just far enough that you adapt. This is the difference between pressure and panic. Pressure is when you're called to rise. It's when your potential is invited to the surface. It sharpens your focus, strengthens your skills, and reveals what you're capable of. Panic, on the other hand, is when the pressure exceeds your perceived ability to cope. It clouds your mind. It paralyzes your decisions. It pulls you into survival mode. The key to managing job stress is learning how to live in pressure without sliding into panic. This requires a mindset shift, because most people assume that stress equals failure, that if they're feeling overwhelmed, they must be weak. But what if we saw stress as a signal, not a flaw? What if we treated it as a sign that we're evolving? Just like sore muscles after a good workout, growth under pressure is like building muscle under resistance. You lift, it hurts, you recover, and then you're stronger. The mistake is when we lift without breaks. When we take on more and more, thinking the answer is to keep pushing. Never resting, always grinding. That's when pressure turns toxic. That's when panic creeps in. To stay in the zone of growth and not drift into burnout, you need to do 3 things. 1, normalize the discomfort. Too many professionals panic the moment they feel out of their depth. But discomfort doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're learning. It means your current level is no longer enough and your next level is on its way. Don't run from the stretch. Learn to breathe in it, to stay grounded in it. That's how resilience is built. 2, create internal regulation systems. Just like high-performing machines have pressure gauges and safety mechanisms, you need internal systems to regulate your stress. That starts with awareness. Can you notice when your breath gets shallow, when your tone gets tense, when your body feels tight? These are early signals. If you listen to them, you can step back, adjust, and keep going. If you ignore them, you fall into panic, and it takes a lot more effort to climb back out. 3, develop recovery rhythms. You don't grow from pressure alone. You grow from the recovery after pressure. So if your day is full of challenges, your habits must be full of recovery. This means building pauses into your workflow. It means prioritizing sleep like your success depends on it, because it does. It means doing things that restore your nervous system so you can re-enter the pressure zone tomorrow stronger, not weaker. Another vital part of managing pressure is your perspective. When you see pressure as a punishment, you resist it, you resent it. But when you see it as part of your process, as the proving ground for who you're becoming, you start to lean into it. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this preparing me for? That change in perspective doesn't remove the challenge, but it adds meaning to it. And meaning is what allows us to endure. Think about any defining moment in your life. Was it easy? Probably not. It was likely born in pressure, maybe even in failure. But it shaped you. It expanded you. It pushed you beyond the edge of who were into who you're now becoming. This is what stress can do, if you use it intentionally. But don't confuse pressure with chaos. You are not meant to live in constant emergency mode. You're not meant to operate at maximum capacity all the time. Growth comes from cycling through pressure and recovery, not camping out in panic. The people who thrive under pressure aren't immune to stress. They've just trained their minds to interpret it differently. They've built support systems. They've practiced self-awareness. And most importantly, they've made peace with the fact that growth is supposed to be uncomfortable. So if you're feeling stretched right now, if your job is pushing you in ways you didn't expect, don't panic. Pause. Reflect. Ask yourself, is this pressure or is this panic? Is this stretching me or is it suffocating me? If it's pressure, lean in. You're growing. If it's panic, step back. You're human. And the most powerful professionals aren't the ones who never feel stressed. They're the ones who know how to recognize it, regulate it, and rise through it, not in spite of pressure, but because of it. The difference between pressure that crushes and pressure that fuels is one word: purpose. Every professional experiences stress. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, what position you hold, or how long you've been doing it, stress finds its way in. But what determines whether that stress breaks you or builds you isn't just how much you're carrying, it's why you're carrying it. Purpose is the emotional engine that powers resilience. It gives meaning to the mess. It gives context to the chaos. It transforms the daily grind into something more than survival. When you're anchored in purpose, the pressure doesn't disappear, but it becomes directional. It points you towards something greater. Without purpose, pressure just feels like punishment. This is why two people can be under the same workload in the same environment and experience it completely differently. One is depleted, the other is driven. One is resentful, the other is resolved. The difference isn't the task, it's the lens. Purpose is that lens. Think of purpose like a compass. It doesn't remove the storm, but it gives you a reason to keep moving through it. When your work is connected to something that matters, something that aligns with who you are, what you believe, and what you hope to create, then even the most difficult days feel like part of the process, not a detour. But the opposite is also true. When your work is disconnected from purpose, even the smallest pressure becomes unbearable. You wake up with dread. You go through the motions. You measure your days by how quickly they can end. And over time, that stress hardens into apathy, not because the work got harder, but because it lost its meaning. So how do you find that sense of purpose again, especially when stress is clouding your vision? You start by stepping back and asking deeper questions. What impact does my work have beyond the task? Who is affected by what I do, directly or indirectly? What values does this work align with in my life? What kind of person am I becoming through this role? These are not surface-level reflections. They require honesty, maybe even discomfort, because sometimes you'll realize you've been doing work that no longer aligns with your beliefs, or that your role has outgrown your passion. That kind of awareness can be painful, but it's also freeing, because now you can choose, you can reconnect, you can realign. You don't need a job with a world-changing mission to feel purpose. Purpose is personal. It's not always found in what you do. It's often found in how and why you do it. Maybe your job is technical or behind the scenes. Maybe it doesn't always feel glamorous. But if it provides for your family, supports your team, or allows you to grow into a better version of yourself, then that's purpose. That's meaning. That's fuel. Sometimes purpose is rediscovered in the people you serve. When stress rises, it's easy to get tunnel vision, to see only the spreadsheets, the meetings, the metrics. But take a step back. Think of the customer whose life is better because of your service, the colleague who performs better because of your support, the client who gets clarity because of your insight. That ripple effect is real. And when you reconnect to it, your work feels less like a burden and more like a contribution. Purpose also helps you set priorities. When you know why something matters, it becomes easier to say no to what doesn't. Stress often comes from trying to do everything for everyone. But purpose gives you a filter, direction. It says, this is what I'm here for. This is what I will protect. This is where I will invest my energy. That clarity is power. And perhaps most importantly, purpose makes the struggle worth it. It reframes the setbacks. It says, this isn't failure, it's formation. This isn't stress, it's shaping. With that mindset, you don't just endure pressure, you harness it. Pressure without purpose is noise. It's static, it grinds you down. But pressure with purpose becomes music. It moves you, it energizes you. It reminds you that the tension you feel is the tension of growth, not collapse. You may not be able to eliminate all stress from your job, but you can anchor yourself in something deeper. Something that turns the weight you're carrying into strength. Something that gives you a reason to keep going when quitting feels easier. Because when purpose enters the picture, stress stops being the end of the story. It becomes part of the transformation. It becomes the fire that forges who you're meant to be. Job stress is not a sign that you're weak. It's not proof that you're incapable. It's a signal, one that calls for a deeper level of awareness, alignment, and ownership. Too often, we try to fight stress with surface-level solutions, a better calendar, a new productivity app, a quick vacation. But the real solution lies beneath all of that. The real solution is rooted in reconnecting to your purpose, your values, your boundaries, and your voice. We overcome job stress not by eliminating every challenge, but by understanding our relationship to it. We don't find peace by doing less. We find it by doing what matters most. We overcome by remembering why we chose this path, by refusing to isolate ourselves, by setting unapologetic boundaries, and by realizing that growth and pressure aren't opposites. They are partners. This is the truth that too many professionals forget. You are not powerless in your stress. You have choices. You have influence. You have the ability to reclaim your clarity, your energy, and your confidence, not by pushing harder, but by leading yourself more intentionally. And it starts not with a new job or a new boss, but with a new mindset. One that says, I will not be defined by pressure. I will not be consumed by pace. I will rise, not because the stress is gone, but because I've grown strong enough to stand in the middle of it with purpose, with perspective, and with peace.